See if you're...
Hey, everybody. I'm here with Mike Trainotti, who is the director of Nocturne. Not only the director, the writer, the editor, sound design. There's some composer credits.
A little bit,
Mike,
yeah.
thanks for coming and
Thanks
doing
for
this
having me.
live conversation with me. Yeah. We met at the Mammoth Film Festival was that end of February? Early March, somewhere in there. It was really
it might have been the last weekend of February or that 1st of March. Yeah, somewhere in there.
It was just as we were getting kicked off into COVID, but quarantine was just around the corner.
Yeah. Before we started working from home around the 13th or so of March, at least for myself. But
pretty soon.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that your film, it's terrifying. Some great twists. It's very fun. And who knew that we were all going to be isolated in our homes just a couple weeks later, which,
right.
I don't know, I've seen this film multiple times, and it kind of reminds me of just being alone in our houses right now, making everything a little bit more.
Right. No, exactly. And it's always
scary.
Interesting too, because if you have, anybody that has a security camera at home now is probably watching all of their, packages get delivered at the front door, waiting for people to leave. And it's, because sometimes you never know, like you see the little thing on your phone pop up that says, motion detected or whatever your app does. And all of a sudden, you don't know what's going to show up at your front door.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I check my camera often. I watching packages arrive, seeing what time they arrive.
Right. Animals
in the night.
Right, exactly. It's weird when you like wake up in the morning or something and you get, there's like 3 or 4 from the previous night, and it's like at 2 in the morning you're like, what was big enough to set that off at like 2 in the morning or whatever. But
I like when the spider crawls in front of it. I have a couple really good shots of spiders.
Right.
So yeah, take me back. Tell me a little bit about how you came up with this idea. I remember it being a unique story when you were telling me. We ended up sitting right beside each other at the festival.
Yeah.
So it was. Yeah, tell me a little bit about.
Yeah. So I was actually writing another sort of short that was going to kind of become like an anthology project with like 4 or 5 shorts connected. And I was most of the way through that, and then just sort of in the background, TV's on, news is on or something, and it was just this image that I think was nationally sort of broadcast, where like a Zoom camera had captured a woman sort of looking, disturbed or whatever, something had happened to her, going sort of door to door and just kind of getting up close, either knocking on doors or staring into the camera or whatever. And she had been bound at one point, and it was just sort of tattered, and just sort of sound off. Really, I wasn't really. That image is what was striking, and I know that turned into another sort of story, but the reality of that, but yeah, it was just sort of like, wow, that's kind of freaky, right? Like, what would you do if just some random person shows up at your door, right? And how would you do that? So within a few days, I kind of paused the other project and wrote, at least the sort of the rough draft of this, which fundamentally didn't change that much until we kind of got a hold of the house we got a hold of, which allowed us to sort of expand certain things and stuff. But it was it was really quick too. It's funny because once you kind of lock onto an idea, and what I would typically do is I would it's like whatever the nucleus of that idea is, whether it's the woman at the door or the character that's going to sort of react to it. Once I kind of figure out where it's going, with sort of the twist, you can kind of work backwards pretty quick and connect all the dots, right? And part of it to me was because on this one, because I had seen that and everything was muted and stuff on the TV, part of me was like, well, this could be something we could shoot, relatively quickly, but I wanted to do with the least amount of dialogue possible, right? And the least amount of characters, right? This, like, what could we potentially do in a couple of days where you didn't, where you weren't dealing with a lot of performance, right? In terms of, 2 people trying to nail the right tone and stuff. Like, could you minimize that and try to build up this tension and suspense, which would drive it all, you know, as opposed to a lot more character interaction, right? Because the reality is other than, you know, the first 3/4 of that short, everybody's independent, right? No one's really seeing the person at the door, so they're all their own performance, and you know, other than when her and Brian are sitting sort of on the couch, and then sort of the chase thing at the end, you know, it's fun.
That gets me every time. It
Yeah,
really
you know,
was. I mean, this one really.
As we were editing it, so I was putting it together here one night, and I knew I had to shoot like all of the texting inserts, right? So my friend Craig, who built the app, was here, sitting right next to where I'm at now, and I'm cutting the scene, and he's like trying to get the app to work, because we were trying to get the app to work live on set, but for whatever reason it wasn't working that night, and so we knew we would have to do all these inserts like later. So we were, you know, he came over and we were going to do it all here. But as I was cutting it together, like even without like music, right? So I'm working through the scene, you know, he kind of like looks up at one point and he's like, oh, you know, that's startling, right? When you make that cut, right? Because there's no audio or nothing. It's just the imagery of it was so powerful. It's like, I know, you know, you put a little tag on that and you're good.
Just a little sound design, it just really gets you every time. I mean, I don't want to give it away. I don't want to say what it is in here. It's just a moment that you don't expect. And every time I've seen it, I'm just like, why did I forget about that? And that's really smart. And I know that you're also an editor. You directed and edited how many shorts?
Oh God.
A lot.
I mean, well, quote unquote, I hate using the word professionally, but like sort of the real ones, there's probably been like 5, 6, 7, whatever. But then, I mean, just tons of other stuff, you know, and
it's got to be very easy for you to see a final product before you even go shoot it, right? Using the editor side of your brain and the director when they come together.
Yeah, I think I
see this kind of laid out when you went in to shoot it.
I think so, because I think, as I said in sort of part of the written stuff we had done last week, is I tend to shoot or direct editorially because I know in my mind kind of how I'm going to piece it together, right? Whereas sometimes a lot of people may not, so you tend to overshoot at a certain extent and grab a lot of coverage and stuff that you don't need. So for me, sort of shooting is almost like pre-editing it. And what everybody, at least that I work with or that help out on these things, will tell you is we shot on a Friday night, and then we shot on a Sunday night, and so, but by like Saturday, morning, I basically had everything cut together, missing certain pieces, right? So that everybody could see what we were doing, on Sunday, right? And they're like,
"You're just so excited to
done." I'm like, no, it's not. It's just so that everybody has a working view of it. Even on most of the shorts that we've done, it's kind of been like that. By the next day we shot, people would be like, I'm like, I just make sure we got everything. If we're missing something, we'll grab it real quick.
It would be fun to work on a project with you. Because it's rare that, you get to come in and see how everything looks. I mean, I've been on movies where you don't see anything until months later when the editor's done with it. I've shot, documentaries are the worst. You have to wait years for them to be finished.
Oh yeah.
Probably like a kid in a candy shop rushing home with your footage and.
Yeah, because documentaries are harder because you're building the story in a way.
Yeah.
And trying to find it. Whereas with this is you're just trying to kind of, make sure you've captured the essence of what it is you're trying to tell. Unfortunately, the majority of stuff that we shot like that first night, was a lot of the stuff without dialogue, right? Mm-hmm. So it was basically the first half of the short. Really, it was up to the point where before she gets to the front door, like this is the second time, right, with the boyfriend there. So, but yeah, so having most of that done, and the other thing too is you start to realize if you have, if you have camera problems, or if you have, my biggest fear is we shoot an entire day and you get home and you've got like a big dead pixel, right? Or you've got some weird lighting anomaly. When we shot, the first night we shot for One Dark Night, we shot a lot of it in my backyard, and we had these 2 tents in the background with the family kind of sitting around the fireplace, and everything was going fine, right? But in both of those tents, we kind of I had these two camping lights, right? That kind of had two levels of luminance. One was, full and half, right? So one tent was set at full and the other tent was set at half. So we shoot through that entire night. And when I go up, and that night I'm like up late, I'm like, I want to cut this, and I start looking at that footage. I start seeing this weird pulsating on the tent that was at half brightness. Fortunately, I could grade it out in terms of the color, and make it, minimize it and use some noise reduction on it. But I was just like, oh my God. So we knew for the next amount of stuff we had to shoot the next days not to do that. So I always get leery when you sort of use, consumer, lights around, especially LEDs, because you just don't know the frequency they're at and if they're going to, so yeah, that's my.
Yeah, there's always something small, but I feel like having the editor brain, already knowing how you want to cut it together, your performances were really strong too, which was nice. Like you weren't skipping over your actors' performances because it's all very convincing. And
yeah, they're great.
Yeah,
they're really great. I mean, I've worked with them a few times now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's played a lot of festivals. Has anything changed since quarantine, or were you still in the festival circuit?
Well, there were more festivals after Mammoth. Unfortunately, they were all sort of postponed, until further notice, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 more that are sort of outstanding. There's one in Pennsylvania, I think, that was scheduled for last month or whatever. And I finally got word from them, I think yesterday, that they finally figured out they're going to do a drive-in thing, right? Where people can, and I was like, that's awesome. Go for it. Right. I mean, whatever it takes to get, to bring people together and have some fun. So.
Oh yeah. A drive-in for this one would be pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Depending on, it's interesting though, because depending on how they're listening to certain things, right? Obviously it's very visual, but certainly the sound design is also important, right? I always enjoy watching it, with just headphones on, right? If I'm just, because you sort of put it together that way. Because I know when I sort of do my preliminary sound design and mix before my friends like tear it all apart and decide to start over, but it's all about sort of, the mood and the, the environment you're creating. Because I'm not a big fan of shorts or of sound design that sounds kind of empty. It's like, even if you're trying to make silence, silence isn't quiet, right? It still has other stuff going on. It's,
there's still a room tone, or there's a
right, something, right? There's a refrigerator going on. I remember spending hours just, with all of that stuff where she's walking into the kitchen and she's like walks by the fridge, right? It's like, there's a fridge that's moving across, panning out over, right? And that fireplace that's on in the corner, right? That's got to be, you've got to have a crackling, right? Even though you're not seeing it a lot, that presence should still be there, right? And all those things make silence, which is important because it's the environment, right? It's like when you walk around your house like at night and the lights are off or something, right? It's quiet, but it's not silent. There's a lot of stuff that you're not, registering. It's just lower.
I'm in this house right now, which is like, I haven't lived in this house for a long time, but I'm back in it because of quarantine, and the power just goes out every once in a while. And I don't know why, but it just goes pitch black. And then I have these backup, APC batteries that just start like screaming.
Right. You've got like your 4 minutes before you're going to.
Exactly. It's like, hey, and you're like, oh God. I know. Silence is never silent. And, it's, I don't know, being in a house is always scary when you're alone. I'm still afraid to go to the basement. I don't want to go down there alone.
No, exactly. And my friend Brian and I, who's the boyfriend of this one, I mean, it's like we keep trying to come up with ways of like doing something during quarantine, like that because the things you're finding out is you get a lot of Zoom films that have sort of been coming out because it's COVID friendly. Mm-hmm. But we're like, is there just a way? Is there something we can put together that is very low touch, but that can be really effective? So maybe it's something we'll throw together and try to do in the next month or so, just to say we've accomplished something during quarantine.
I know. Well, it feels kind of like a little bit of like a what's the word I'm trying to come up with? Like a not like a time. Yeah, it's like a time capsule. Like creating content during this time, because there's so many shows that have somehow so quickly switched to like everyone's doing things on Zoom. And like, I'm like, how did everyone shift so fast? And like now these shows are like people walking around with their own phones and filming the show.
Right.
I'm like, well, we adapted really quick. Not everything can be that way, but you know, reality type stuff. Sometimes you catch an episode of Catfish and you're like, whoa, this is wild. They're already all on Zoom.
Right. No, exactly. You know, in some cases they're on Zoom working with stuff they shot prior to quarantine, right? And so you know, it's these mixes, but at a certain point, it's just all got to be Zoom unless they've been allowed to go back to production on stuff. But
I haven't really heard of anyone going back to production. A few people are sneaking them in. I know like a couple makeup artists. I don't know what they're working on, but maybe some people are sneaking in.
Yeah, when it typically works is you start getting into the sort of the bubble concept, right? Where everybody, you know, quarantines up front, tests, goes to wherever the place is, test, quarantine, and then you're in the mix. And if you leave, you got to go back through it all again before you're allowed back. But
have you been watching any sports during quarantine?
I've actually started watching like the NASCAR and ARCA series and stuff that I would like watch years ago. I'm like, it's on. You can get like 5 or 6 races, you know, a week if you really try. And it's like, it's fun just to kind of like record them and then like skip through to the fun parts, you know, especially the latter half. But just that. I mean, there's really.
I know NASCAR is popping off right now.
Yeah.
It's like they're thriving. I mean, they're letting a quarter of the fans in, but still, that's 25,000 people in a stadium.
Right. No, exactly. It's the perfect sport, at least from a competitor side, because you're locked in a car, right? For 200 miles, 300 miles, or whatever. Yeah, but yeah.
What about NBA?
I haven't much.
Yeah, have you seen a game?
No, I haven't. It's
weird.
Yeah.
Like they're playing in a court, and the coaches are right here, and then above them are these screens where like I don't know how the fans are being picked, but like our faces would be up in a seat, and we're like watching the game, just like that. It's pretty trippy. I don't know. I feel like there's like you watching the news, how you got the idea for this woman. It was just something that sparked a little inspiration. Like there's plenty of weird stuff going on right now that someone like you or some I don't know, a group of people are just gonna figure it out and they're gonna have the next, you know, Blair Witch Project or something.
Right. No, like I said, I've seen a couple of them now that have been released on various platforms within the last couple of weeks, and it's like they're great. They're not necessarily feature length, you know, they're like 50, 60 minutes or something like that, but they're great. And clearly they made it during quarantine. They obviously have some solid chops in terms of the finishing and all the other stuff, and it was good. It was a good distraction. It was entertaining. That's all you can ask for, something new and unique. That's fun.
So you don't have anything right now that you've come up with?
Not yet. It's more
a teaser for the upcoming film.
Yeah, it's because it's just kind of one of those like plans to just for like 2 or 3 of us to kind of like get together, you know, in an isolated way and do something, but not. I don't want to. If it can avoid being a Zoom thing, I'd like to do it, even if it's just letting him or them or whoever shoot stuff, right, and just sort of direct through Zoom. You know, send them the camera, say here's all the stuff, go do this, and these are the 30 shots, right, and whatever that, you know, that we need to grab something. We'll come up with it.
I want to see, and maybe you're the person to do it, somebody like isolated with their family, using their family, everyone's like participating. There's got to be something out there, a unique filmmaking family who can come up with something like The Shining or something. Just 4 people doing something really wild. I don't know. Everyone feel like
yeah,
on TikTok.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know.
Are you on TikTok yet?
No, I actually have a very minimal social media sort of presence, right? This is
Yeah.
probably the most social media sort of thing that I've done in a long time. But yeah, I mean, this is, it's an interesting time. I know we'll come up with something. The goal would be to make sure that sort of the hook of it works, right?
Yeah.
And that it's more than just sort of the punchline to a joke type of thing, right? Because one thing, and at least, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but in a lot of times when you go to a lot of the festivals, there's a ton of amazing stuff, right? But sometimes you'll get certain shorts, and in some cases it's the horror stuff, but sometimes the short can kind of feel like the punchline to a joke. Like they're kind of telling a joke. It's horrific, and they've built all this mood and tension, and it's really good. Then you get to the final thing, whatever it is, right? And it's like boo, right? And then the short ends, and it says like directed by or something, right? And it's like, what? I wanted more, right? Like what happens next, right? Because in Nocturne, we could certainly have stopped at that beat, right? But the fun part was what happens after that beat, right? And like there's more to this. So my recommendation to people that make shorts is just go a little further, and
Keep
just
going.
see where it goes.
Try getting to your third act at the end of the first and just see what would happen afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
I would even say, stay to the end of your credits. I watch all the way through at the end of your credits.
Right.
There's a little button there.
That was the very last thing we did, by the way. And it was one of those things where I was with my sound guy, and I'm like, hey, I'm gonna put this thing whatever here, and then just put the audio whatever in, right? And I'm like, I'll just cut in the picture later. So yeah, it was the very, very last thing that we did, which was fun.
Great.
And yeah, I mean, give it a payoff, give it a little bit more. It doesn't have to end, you don't have to solve all the world's problems by the end of a short, God knows. So, but at least have a point that seems like the logical stopping point, right? Or, where you could imagine going even further with this, or but don't stop once you've got a scare, right? There has to be more than that, It's like all those old videos, which they still probably go around online, where someone would send you something and it's like, it's this video and it's a serene countryside, and then this zombie face jumps in frame, right? It's like, all right, that's
classic.
Right. It's fun and it's funny, but it's like, but that's not a short film,
No, it's gimmicky. And that's what I feel like, creating a good short is definitely hard. You don't, you want to build an experience and try not to make it gimmicky. And a lot achieve that, a lot don't, but
Yeah, and at the end, and don't, I know I said that I basically had a rough cut of the first half in 12 hours, but don't necessarily rush it either, right? I mean, once you get to your rough cut, there's a lot of little things, fine tuning and tweaks, and take, and in a way, it's almost like get it to a point and then let it simmer for a little while, then go back again and kind of look at it, and you might, come up with, it just may be different because when you're first putting these things together, it's so fresh in your mind, all of the things that you've done, and you've kind of got this vision in your head. But if you give it a couple of weeks to simmer and listen to, your cohorts, right? Whoever else is looking at it, watching it, and kind of helping, and take that advice and just make sure you're telling the best version of it, right? And most importantly is make sure the mix is good, because I can watch shorts all day long that could look terrible. If they sound good, that's all that matters, right? Yeah. And sound is 90% of it, right? I would rather have a ton of shorts shot on iPhones or anything, right? That as long as they sound great, I'm in.
I agree. I believe the sound is one of the most important senses of visual media.
Yeah,
because
make sure your dialogue tracks are clean and all that.
Yeah, it brings you into it a little bit more. Like visually, they can tell their story if it's like a little bit more, low quality, but the audio has to bring you in. And I think that was what was so cool working in VR, is like you could forgive the quality of it because everyone knows we weren't just there yet, but the audio was for some reason, expect it to be good, and we had spatial audio
right.
and
No,
ASMR type
yeah.
experiences.
One of my favorite parts of working on this one is actually I was helping a friend. He had these two friends of mine had done a film in the 80s that they were basically took them 30 years to actually complete. And we was helping them kind of finish it at that point in time. And the movie jumped back and forth between black and white and color because they were telling, it's just this awkward story, but it sort of cuts back. Some of the stuff is black and white and color because there's two different things going on, right? So I always had this sort of, this color black and white thing that I've been seeing a lot of. And for this, I knew that I wanted, camera footage, and black, sort of black and white and color. So in my mind, or as I was putting it together with all of the doorbell camera footage, I wanted it to be as sort of grungy as I could sort of get it, right? So it wasn't so, too pure and stuff. So I was adding like vertical lines and stuff and, color separation, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of fun to just make it look grungy because in a weird way, the grungier it looked, the more realistic it would feel,
It was very well done. I was actually going to ask you if they were real, like Ring cameras or something. I felt like you were probably using real cameras, but it also could have been Ring, or Nest.
I'll tell you what we did is we bought a Ring doorbell camera. And for whatever reason, as we were sitting there trying to get it all to work, I was trying at home like the day before with one I had bought, and it just wasn't like working. It wasn't giving us, any like footage or anything from it. And so we scrubbed that. And what I did is I put a super wide angle lens on my iPhone and then stuck the iPhone, between this Christmas wreath that was hanging from a pull-up bar at the front door with a flashlight, just sort of lighting Megan. And it was really that, right? And so it was like, it's going to be what it's going to be, right? If it's soft, if it's out of focus, if it's jumping, whatever it's doing, it's going to do. And it's going to have at least the feel of it. And I just made it look more like it.
I love that
as we were going. So
because like it just crushed it. Because also like when you're shooting the night vision, like on my Nest camera, it does make it kind of blown out like that, right. And like super high when you get.
Hang on 1 second for Eric. I got you.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's a moment we can cut out. As I went the door. Go ahead on the night vision stuff.
I was just saying that on the night vision camera, it's always a lot like it's blown out when you get close to it. So yeah, you did a great job at making it look exactly like one of them.
Yeah, it was fun, right? And honestly, I mean, all of that stuff that we shot with Megan at the front door, while they were setting up stuff in the other room, I'm like, let's go, come on, let's go up to the front door and do it. And we got that stuff in like 15, 20 minutes, right? There's not a ton of takes. I think we may have run through it twice, and her performance was great, and she nailed it. And what's always fun about that, right, is because you have her side of it that you're recording, obviously with the conversation, without Sabrina talking to her, right? So she's sort of just running, her lines, and then you go inside and then you shoot the other side of it, and you always wonder how that's gonna cut together and what's going to be important to show, right? Like, do you want Sabrina at all to talk over imagery of Megan, or is it going to be this sort of back and forth? Is there a combination, like what's going to sell it the most? And so that's always fun to find, right? And those are the things that change most editorially, right? Especially after the sort of your rough draft, but yeah, like finding it is, it's always exciting to see how best, to piece those things together. But yeah.
Well, I think it came together perfectly. It was definitely the scariest and unique, fresh feeling film that I saw at the Mammoth Film Festival. And I was glad to meet you, happened to sit next to you, and glad that this all worked out.
Yeah, that was very fortunate. That was a good festival that we've been there actually the last 3 years. with the prior 3 short, these last 3 shorts, we've been there. And so it's like, you know, and we're not gonna obviously be there this year because I don't know if we'll have something ready in time, but yeah, no.
Or if anybody will be there.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, one of the other things that we did in the short, which I failed to mention before, is we were trying to figure out what Sabrina or Erin, the character's name in the short, is like, what's on sort of TV in the background. You know, what's the you know, there's that movie playing or something, right? Because when we start, it basically starts pushing into like the front of the house, right? And it's almost like there's an argument going on in the house, right? That was a complete last minute thing that happened, but that's actually a really early short that I did. We basically took a scene and basically played it, and then there's video footage of an earlier short playing back on the television before it switches to the news broadcast.
Cool.
So it's like, that's the great thing about shorts, is you've always got material to use as TV shows or stuff, you know.
Did you shoot the newscast, or was that actually the newscast that you found?
No, I shot it on I mean, sorry, I built it in Final Cut, right? I shot 2 things like 2 days before we started shooting the short, one with Jade, who's the woman in One Dark Night. So she came over to a friend's house and we shot her there, and another friend had come over and we shot her there. So we had the sort of the, you know, the imagery for the news broadcast. And then Rick Jones, one of the producers, is you know, the newsman, sort of doing the voice. And then Donna Thomas, who's also part of it, was sort of the on the street reporter, which we had shot in front of her house. But ultimately it's like, I don't need to cut to you, just because it's the audio that's going to run it. And it's going to be, you know, Sabrina on the couch doing, you know, waking up and, you know, going through her motions of sort of being hungover for being, you know, after this fight, you know, that we sort of play out on the iPhone as she's sort of sweeping up through what had happened, which seemed interesting. How much backstory could you get without saying anything?
I'm kind of shocked at how well you could understand what happened. They're just scrolling. I was like, yeah, I picked it right up immediately. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it could also.
It really is like.
Yeah.
Good.
It could have also been the name that he reassigned, or that she reassigned him.
Yeah.
To.
It draws you in. That's for sure. You're like, damn, what did he do? Oh shit.
Yeah, it's fun too, because you know, in those photos, it's actually Brian and his wife, right? So
nice.
You know, so we were playing against that. That was actually the hardest of anything that we shot. The hardest thing to shoot was having to shoot the stuff on the iPhone in camera with Brian, because we were trying to do it like live text, right? So that he would be texting me and I would be texting him and I would be typing, so we could just sort of see this thing play out. And just the timing of that was weird, right? Because you wanted it always to say now, right? Now, not like 10 minutes ago, or you know how the texts usually have some sort of time stamp on them. So we had to do that a bunch of different times. Oh, wow. But it worked.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you built all that or if it was actually already in there.
Those are texts. We built the app. Craig built the app that basically whenever you tapped it, it would play the thing you wanted it to play, right? Like, or it would come up with motion at front door, right? All those things were sort of pre-programmed in the app. When you hit a button, it did that, and then 5 seconds later, it would come up, you know, to do this, and then, you know, but it was, you know, the Nocturne app, which is still probably on my phone somewhere. But that was fun. We had, you know, that was our production value.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to put the film right here, so when we're done here, people can go immediately click and watch it.
Fantastic.
And it was great chatting with you. And I hope you come up with something during this time so we can have more films from you soon.
Yeah, no problem. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out, you know, through the links available.
I'll put your info in the info down here on YouTube.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right. Mike, thanks so much, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Anytime. We'll talk soon.
All right. See ya.